During a crowded event at Joel Osteen's megachurch, an unexpected confrontation shocked the audience. When Osteen allegedly instructed security to remove Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré, no one could have imagined what would come next. Rather than backing down, Traoré responded in a way that completely reversed the situation, leaving the crowd stunned and sparking worldwide conversations about dignity, courage, and faith. The video captured a moment the world could not stop talking about. The lights inside Joel Osteen's megachurch shone brightly, reflecting off the towering glass walls. Thousands filled the seats, their voices buzzing with excitement. Cameras flashed. The gathering felt more like an international concert than a sermon. Among the crowd sat a quiet, composed figure, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. He had not come for fame or spectacle. As he often said, he had come to draw strength where faith is shared. Suddenly, a whisper spread into a wave of murmurs. Security men in black suits moved toward the section where Traoré was seated. Confusion spread quickly, like fire. The music stopped. Even the choir fell silent. One guard leaned in and said firmly, "You must leave now. Orders from the pastor." The room froze in disbelief. Nobody expected a guest, especially a president, to be treated this way. All eyes turned to Traoré. Would he leave quietly? Would he resist? Instead, he stood tall, calm in face, yet sharp in his eyes, holding something far deeper than anger. The air grew heavy. People leaned forward. Something unforgettable was about to happen. Every camera turned, every phone lifted. The attempted removal of Ibrahim Traoré had already become a global spectacle, streamed live within seconds. Children clung to their parents. Some whispered, "Why are they doing this to him?" Unease spread. Traoré did not resist. He raised his hand gently, signaling the guards to wait. His calmness unsettled the room. With a soft but steady voice, he spoke. "If I must leave, I will leave. But before I go, let me say this." The church fell silent. Even Joel Osteen leaned forward at the front. Traoré's words were not political, but profoundly human. He spoke of his people, farmers, mothers, and children, longing for dignity in their future. He described faith not as performance, but as a shield carrying him through nights of fear and days of sacrifice. Tears filled strangers' eyes. His voice carried weight, not because of his position, but because of his truth. Yet the guards still stood, uncertain. The tension grew unbearable. What would happen next? For a moment, the world held its breath. Cameras streamed live to millions, and social media erupted. Traoré trended globally within minutes. Slowly, he walked toward the stage, not to resist, but to face the people. His footsteps echoed like drums in the silent hall. Standing under the bright lights, he showed neither shame nor anger. With emotion in his trembling voice, he declared, "Faith is not about who we push away. It is about who we welcome. If I, a man from a distant land, am not accepted here, then at least let me leave you with this truth. God's house has no borders." The audience gasped. Many wept. The guards lowered their hands, ashamed to touch him. An old woman in the front row rose and clapped. Then another and another. Soon the church thundered with applause and tears. What was meant as humiliation had transformed into triumph. But this was only the beginning. In the days to follow, this single moment would ignite a worldwide firestorm no one could escape. Joel Osteen shifted uneasily in his seat. The overwhelming applause for Traoré was not what he had expected. His usually polished smile looked forced as he whispered to a staff member, his fingers tapping nervously on the armrest. The congregation split in reaction. Some stared at Osteen, questioning why he had humiliated a guest. Others fixed their eyes on Traoré, who stood like a calm flame in the storm. A young man shouted from the audience, "Let him speak, let him finish." His cracked voice echoed across the hall. Suddenly, dozens joined in the call. Osteen raised his hand to quiet the room, but the crowd paid no attention. Traoré had won their hearts within minutes. For the first time in that vast church, Joel Osteen was no longer the center of attention. The stage, the lights, and the atmosphere now belonged to Ibrahim Traoré. The pastor leaned back, realizing he had lost control of the moment. The more he tried to silence the crowd, the louder they resisted. Something historic was unfolding, and he could not stop it. Traoré drew a slow breath, his voice deep yet gentle. "I do not come here as a leader. I come here as a brother, as a man who knows suffering." The crowd leaned closer. His French accent carried a rhythm that made every word sink deeper. He spoke of children walking miles under the burning African sun just to find water, of mothers praying every night for bread to feed their families, of fathers working the soil with bleeding hands, yet never losing faith. People in the audience wiped tears from their faces. Even those who had never heard of Burkina Faso felt the weight of his words. His story was no longer about a distant land. It was about humanity itself. A middle-aged woman near the choir stood sobbing. "We need this truth," she cried. Others rose with her, standing in solidarity. The guards who had been ordered to remove him now stepped back fully, their eyes lowered. In that moment, they were no longer security men, but witnesses to something sacred. This was not just a speech. It was a wound being opened and a healing being shared. The atmosphere was electric. Journalists in the back, who had expected a routine service, typed furiously on their laptops. Headlines were already writing themselves. Joel Osteen finally rose from his chair, his polished shoes. Decade had clicked against the marble floor as he walked toward the stage. His smile had returned, but it seemed forced, almost desperate. Standing a few feet from Traoré, Osteen reached for the microphone. The crowd booed softly. Some even shouted, "Let him finish." The authority Osteen usually commanded had slipped away like sand through his fingers. Yet Traoré, with surprising humility, handed him the microphone. The gesture stunned everyone. He could have refused, but instead he showed respect. Osteen's hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "This is a house of God. We must keep order." Before he could continue, a young child's voice rang out from the balcony. "Then let God speak through him." The church erupted. Tears, clapping, cries. The pressure had reached its breaking point. Traoré bowed his head briefly, then lifted his eyes, and the world seemed to lean closer. Something greater was about to unfold. By the next morning, the video of the clash had spread across the internet like wildfire. Clips of Traoré's calm defiance and the audience's thunderous response trended on every platform. TikTok edits, Twitter hashtags, and Facebook shares portrayed him as a symbol of unshakable dignity. In Houston, local news replayed the moment endlessly. Commentators debated late into the night, was Osteen wrong or was it all a misunderstanding? Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, people gathered around radios and televisions, tears filling their eyes as they watched their leader stand tall before the world. Farmers, students, and elders spoke with pride. "He carried us with honor." Inside the church, Osteen's team scrambled to control the narrative. Press statements claimed protocol had been misunderstood, but people weren't convinced. The clash was no longer about one incident in a church. It had become a global mirror reflecting deeper questions. Who belongs in the house of God? And why did one African leader's words pierce millions of hearts across oceans? On Tuesday morning, Traoré was invited to a small prayer meeting in Houston, organized by African immigrants. The room was simple. Folding chairs, a rented hall, no flashing lights, but it overflowed with love. Mothers in bright African fabrics wept as they embraced him. "You reminded us we are not forgotten," one said through tears. Children ran to him with shy smiles as though seeing a hero in real life. That day, Traoré did not speak like a politician. He prayed with them, knelt with them, and listened. He reminded them that dignity does not come from titles or wealth, but from standing firm in truth. Unnoticed by him, a journalist in the back recorded the gathering. The short clip of Traoré kneeling beside crying mothers and holding their hands spread even faster than the clash itself. Across America, people compared the glitter of Osteen's stage with the raw humility of Traoré's prayer. The contrast was sharp, stirring, emotions words alone could not contain. The world was beginning to see him not only as a president, but as a voice for the forgotten. By midweek, Joel Osteen was under immense pressure. His church's phone lines rang nonstop. Some supporters defended him, but many were outraged. Longtime congregants demanded answers. Why would you humiliate a guest, especially a man of faith? Major newspapers seized on the story. Opinion writers questioned the values of modern megachurches. For the first time in his career, Osteen's carefully polished image began to crack. Inside his mansion, advisors urged him to issue an apology, but he hesitated. His pride battled with the fear of losing his global audience. Meanwhile, Traoré remained calm. He did not lash out at Osteen or respond with anger. Instead, he continued visiting ordinary people, hospitals, community centers, small churches. Everywhere he went, crowds followed, eager to see the man who had dared to stand with dignity. What had begun inside one building was now shaking the conscience of the world. With every passing hour, Joel Osteen realized that what he had tried to silence had grown into a storm beyond his control. On Wednesday evening, as Traoré prepared for a quiet dinner with local African pastors in Houston, an aide handed him a sealed envelope flown in from Burkina Faso. It came from school children who had written to him after watching the viral video. Inside were simple notes, written in shaky handwriting. One child wrote, "President, we saw you on TV. You made us proud. Please don't let anyone push you away. We are with you." Another, just 8 years old, had drawn a picture of Traoré standing tall inside a church, surrounded by angels. As he read, his eyes grew heavy with emotion. For a man known for strength, it was rare to see him wipe tears from his face. He whispered to his aide, "If even a child can understand dignity, then the world must listen." Pastors who witnessed him cry that night later said they had never seen such humility in a leader. The image of a president holding children's letters close to his chest soon became the next powerful moment shared worldwide. Thursday brought even greater turmoil within Osteen's church. While some members demanded he repair the damage with a public apology, others walked away completely. For the first time, empty seats appeared at services usually filled to capacity. In Bible study groups across Houston, people debated, was this really about protocol, or had pride overtaken humility? Could a church claiming to welcome all stand by silencing a visitor who only spoke of faith and dignity? Meanwhile, Traoré quietly visited a local hospital. Cameras caught him praying at the bedside of a sick child, his hand gently resting on the boy's shoulder. The child's mother sobbed uncontrollably, thanking him for his kindness. That short clip spread even faster than the clash itself, sparking comparisons between Osteen's glittering stage and Traoré's quiet humanity. The scandal was no longer just about religion. It had become a question of true leadership. People began to realize that power was not always found in palaces or pulpits, but sometimes in the simple act of kneeling beside the brokenhearted. By Friday, global networks had seized the story. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera ran long segments showing side-by-side images. Joel Osteen standing stiffly under bright lights, and Ibrahim Traoré bending low to comfort strangers. In Burkina Faso, massive crowds filled the streets, not with anger, but with celebration. They carried banners with his image and the words, "Dignity cannot be removed." Students recited his words in classrooms. Elders praised him in marketplaces. Back in Houston, pressure mounted on Osteen to act. Yet Traoré made no demands, no accusations. His silence became the loudest challenge of all. The world saw a man who refused to insult his host, choosing instead to let his actions speak. Late at night, Osteen stared at the headlines flashing across his phone. For the first time, his polished world felt fragile. The man he had tried to dismiss had become the very example of faith people longed for. The week was not yet over, but the storm only grew stronger. With each passing hour, the world waited to see what Traoré's final response would be. On Saturday morning, community leaders in Houston gathered at a town hall to discuss the growing controversy. The atmosphere was tense. Some defended Joel Osteen, suggesting it had been a misunderstanding, while many demanded he confront the harm he had caused. Unexpectedly, a representative from Osteen's team arrived and quietly slipped a note to the moderator. Inside was a short message. "Pastor Joel is willing to meet President Traoré privately." The room buzzed. Some thought it was too late, while others saw it as a step toward healing. When the message reached Traoré, he sat silently for several minutes, eyes lowered in thought. Then he replied softly, "If the invitation is genuine, I will go. Not for myself, but for those who need to see dignity and humility walk together." News of the possible meeting spread like fire. The world waited anxiously. Would the two men face each other again? Could reconciliation be found, or would the wounds deepen? That evening, in a quiet room away from cameras, Joel Osteen and Ibrahim Traoré finally stood face to face again. The pastor, usually glowing with confidence, looked subdued. His voice wavered as he spoke. "I may have misjudged. Perhaps I acted too quickly. The world has turned this into something I never expected." Traoré looked at him steadily. There was no anger in his eyes, only deep sadness. When a man is shamed in public, the wound spreads far beyond his own heart. It reaches nations, families, and children. But forgiveness, he paused, forgiveness too can spread, if it is genuine. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Osteen nodded slowly, tears visible in his eyes. The weight of the past days seemed to press down on him. Witnesses later said that Traoré placed his hand softly on Osteen's shoulder, not as an opponent, but as a brother. That quiet act of grace would reach the press hours later, sending shockwaves around the globe. By Sunday morning, photos of Osteen and Traoré embracing were everywhere. Social media erupted with disbelief. Some wept with relief, while others whispered that perhaps miracles still happened in the modern age. In Burkina Faso, church bells rang in celebration. Crowds filled the streets waving flags and singing hymns. In Houston, even critics softened, moved by the sight of two men bridging such a deep divide. Yet it was no longer just about them. Across the world, pastors, priests, and imams wove the story into their sermons. They spoke of courage that refuses humiliation and humility that chooses forgiveness. Meanwhile, Traoré kept his schedule plain. He attended a small Sunday service in a modest local church. No cameras, no ceremony. There he prayed quietly, thanking God not for triumph but for peace. The world observed closely, sensing that this storm of the week was nearing its end. Still, everyone knew the last words, the closing chapter, were yet to come. On Sunday evening, Joel Osteen's megachurch was once more filled to the brim. But this time, people had not come for music or routine worship. They had come to witness history. The lights dimmed, cameras rolled, and every major news outlet streamed the service live. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Joel Osteen walked onto the stage with Ibrahim Traoré at his side. The crowd burst out, some crying, some clapping uncontrollably. Many never imagined the two men would stand together again. Osteen's voice trembled as he spoke first. "I was wrong. I acted out of fear, and I wounded not only a man, but also the spirit of God's message. Tonight I ask forgiveness from President Traoré and from all of you." The silence that followed was weighty. Then Traoré stepped forward. He did not speak of pride or anger. Instead, he placed his hand on Osteen's shoulder and said, "Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the strength to rebuild what pride sought to destroy. Tonight, let us rebuild together." Tears streamed down the faces of strangers. In that moment, the clash was transformed into healing. By Monday morning, the images of Traoré and Osteen standing side by side had circled the world. Newspapers called it the embrace heard around the globe. Social media overflowed with emotion. I cried harder than ever watching this. This is what leadership is: dignity, forgiveness, and faith. In Burkina Faso, schools paused their lessons to show the footage. Children clapped and cheered when they saw their president embrace forgiveness instead of bitterness. Elders in villages prayed blessings over him, grateful that he had represented them with honor. In Houston, members of Osteen's church who had drifted away returned, not for spectacle, but because hope had returned. The clash that began in humiliation had ended in something far greater: unity. Even world leaders quietly took notice. Commentators said the lesson was larger than religion. It was about humanity, about choosing dignity in the face of insult and grace in the face of shame. The week had begun in scandal, but it was closing in miracle. Before departing Houston on Tuesday, Traoré held one final gathering. It was not in a stadium or a polished church, but outside, under the open sky, where hundreds of ordinary people waited. He spoke simply, his voice heavy with feeling. We are all children of God. No title, no nation, no wealth can change that. What happened this week is not about me. It is about us, about how we can choose dignity, courage, and faith, even when tested. Then he bowed his head and prayed. Mothers wept, fathers wiped their eyes, and children clapped their small hands with joy. The sound of hope carried far beyond Houston. Later that day, as his plane departed, thousands waved farewell, holding signs that read, "Dignity cannot be erased." The clash that had been meant to silence Ibrahim Traoré instead gave the world a story of faith stronger than humiliation, and forgiveness stronger than pride.